Because if you talk to anyone who's lived amongst indigenous
Yeah,
people who have not been totally traumatized by our culture,
yeah,
they laugh all the time. And they're not
yeah,
laughing inappropriately. They're laughing because their hearts are genuinely
yeah,
singing with joy, because they are an integral part of the web of life, which is raw compassion. And they know themselves to be that. So the hallmarks of an initiation culture are that the individuals within it undergo intermittent, episodic, contained encounters with death. And the containment is held by the elders and the shamans, by the tribe, but mostly by the web of life. And so the individual gets to the edges of themselves where death is a genuine possibility, and they ask for help. And if they ask for help and are able to receive and embody that help, then they survive. And if they can't and they don't, then they don't.
Hello and welcome to the True Wealth podcast, where we ask the question, what does it mean to be truly wealthy in this digital age of distraction and disconnection? I'm your host, Betty Cotton Birtles, blues singer, Buddhist, mum of two, and former global shoestring adventurer turned hypnotherapist and mindset coach. I believe that by healing our past and changing our beliefs, we may achieve not only the external successes, the house, the relationship, the money, the impact, but also internal success, the ability to actually enjoy our lives, because it's the joy and happiness that makes it all worthwhile. Join me as I invite friends, colleagues, and esteemed teachers to discuss means of enhancing enjoyment in our lives, following our inspiration as individuals to create whatever it is that lights us up, so that we might radiate that energy out into the world via our businesses or our day-to-day lives, with the intention that all beings may benefit. I believe that this is where true wealth lies. Welcome to the show. Dream deeply, rise up strong. A change is coming. Now, these are words that really speak to my heart, and hopefully they speak to yours too. And they're also the tagline for Manda Scott's new novel, Any Human Power, which is a throughtopian thriller, a political thriller, actually. I mean, very exciting book that takes the reader on a journey from kind of present day to a future that we would be proud to leave behind for future generations. And this is, as Manda Scott, my guest for today, as she will explain in the interview. And I really don't want to talk too much now because I do a lot of talking in a minute. But really, what I adore about Manda is that she is using her gift for writing. She is a wonderful writer, and as I'm about to, you'll hear me now. As I met her, I explained how I came across her books and how they were for me. The series of books that I first came across, as you'll hear in a moment, is her series of Boudica books, all about the warrior queen from the pre-Roman times here in Britain. Boudica, the Boudica. Yeah. And honestly, these books were utterly gripping for me. And I just could not put them down for about 6 weeks. And I came out the other side and looked up and I felt completely changed. And I just had to write to Manda, the author, and find out more about her. I just thought, who on earth has written these books? They are incredible. And that's when I went to Manda's website, mandascott.co.uk, and I found out about what she does, all this other work she does in the world. You know, she teaches shamanic dreaming. She has a master's from the Schumacher College in regenerative economics. I mean, she's fascinating. She's got all sorts of strings to her bow. She was a veterinary surgeon before she became an author. And she is deeply connected to the non-human world, and you'll feel that, you know, in her when you read her books, when you hear her speak. And I really recommend not only that you check out her books, there are 16 of them in total, Any Human Power being the latest of them. And also listen to her podcast, Accidental Gods podcast, where she interviews people doing extraordinary things and the reason it's called Accidental Gods, I found out, was because that's what we are. You know, with the fate of our species and other species' survival in our own hands, we have become accidental gods. You know, we have to do something about this meta crisis. And she is using her voice and her skills to the best of her ability. You know, how can she help to bring about the changes that are so needed? And she uses her podcast as a platform for interviewing people who are doing work at the cutting edge, you know, really changing, bringing about this overdue changes that are needed in all different parts of life. So yeah, without any further ado, please forgive my girlish enthusiasm. This is the first time that I had written to an author, somebody who I had no connection with at all, and said, would you come on? And I was just so excited to be speaking to her, as you're about to hear. So please do forgive my kind of very girlish enthusiasm, but I think we both, Manda and I, enjoyed this connection and this conversation, and yeah, I found it deeply nourishing, and I hope that you'll get something out of it too. I really hope that you'll feel inspired to dig deeper into her work. Yeah, without further ado, this is Manda Scott. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for this. Welcome, Manda, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's always a bit daunting when someone's excited, because I think I always don't quite live up to their expectations, but I'll do my best.
Okay, I'm not at all excited for this podcast.
Perfect.
You know, it's just another day in my life. No, really, the reason I'm so excited, Manda, is because, and I just started to mention this story before we hit record, and then I said, look, let's record, let's go. So in December, a few months ago, a good friend of mine, a mother from our school community, the kids go to a Steiner school here in West Wales, so we've got an idyllic, lovely community.
Fantastic.
And a fellow mother is a fellow dreamer and a wonderful human being. And she said to me, she just mentioned the Boudica. She said, I'm reading this book about Boudica. And I kind of went, And I'm not a person who reads historical novels. And I'm not even a person, or I haven't been until quite recently, who really has spent much time reading novels as an adult. As a child and a young adult, I devoured them. I spent my whole life in novels. And then I think since I've been building my business and kind of being a mother, and I immersed myself in the kind of self-help and just non-fiction world of
and all the things
reading
you need to know that
lot.
you didn't know you needed to know until you suddenly need to know them.
Personal development, yeah, absolutely. And so for the last, I don't know, probably my eldest is 9 now. So yeah, at least that long, and probably longer. Before that, I was reading books on Buddhism. So, you know, it's been 15, 20 years I've been reading non-fiction. And then suddenly, well, yours wasn't the first novel that I came to, but in the last year I had the experience of we went on holiday. I think this is what happened. We had a lovely week in Mallorca, and my partner spent a lot of the time reading. And I
Glued
thought
in
to
a book,
myself, when
right.
you're on holiday, you need to read novels. That's
Right.
what
Yeah.
that's like what
That's
you
why they
do
have
on holiday.
airport bookshops.
I don't
Exactly
want to
so that
read
you can do that.
personal
Yeah.
development on holiday. So anyway, but I realized that I had a book with me. I never read it. So then I got home and I said to myself, I'm not going to work tomorrow. I was so pissed off that I hadn't read a novel on holiday. We'd been away and I'd just been with the kids and busy. And so I thought, I went to Waterstones. It would be nice if I said it was a lovely independent local bookshop, but I went to Waterstones and I just looked around and it was the first time in my adult life that I'd spent, gone with no time pressure, no like money pressure, because I think I'd always read secondhand books or what people gave me
from the
or
library
things.
or
Yeah. And so it was the first time I went in and I went, God, what would I read if I could read any of this? And it was just
what's
such
going to call to you? That's always really interesting.
yeah.
What did call to you?
What
was
called
it
to me
you got?
then, that was like at the beginning of maybe a year ago or 18 months ago. And I went into, oh gosh, what are those? I can see one of them on the bookshelf. I'm just going to lean away from the mic a moment. Betty, actually my name is a bit ridiculous, but it's an amazing book by Tiffany Daniels, I think. So that was one. And then the other ones that really spoke to me, and I don't have the author's name, but it might come, are about, like the ancient Greek, this new retelling
Right, yes, there's
from
a lot of that.
Circe, I think is
Oh,
one
Circe.
of them.
Right, okay.
Madeline
Yes, Madeline.
Miller.
Yes, brilliant.
So a
Really
couple
good
of
writer.
those, really.
Okay, you were landing on good feet. That's really good.
I just discovered this like lust for novels that I just had not experienced since being a young person, and it was so exciting. Anyway, so fast forward a little bit, and my friend on the school run just meant no, we were in a soft play. We're in a soft play in Pembrokeshire, and she said, "Oh yeah, I've been reading this book, Boudica," and I just went, "Huh." And I went and I bought the first one and I just barely looked up. When you're in, I'm sure you've experienced this as a...
And as a writer, it's the best thing anyone can say. Your book just dragged me in and I couldn't step away. It's great. Thank you.
I found all sorts of time I didn't know I had.
Yeah, or someone else who was prepared to pick up the slack, which is always a good thing to know.
Yeah, so anyway, that's me. And so all of that to say that Boudica, this series that you've written, 3 books, although there's a prequel. There's a prequel, isn't there?
No, there's 4 books. It was originally conceived of as a trilogy.
No,
and
I've read all
then
4.
We added a 4th book. Yeah, so I had a good editor who was prepared to say, actually, this needs to be 4, and made it happen.
I have read all 4. That was I just missed.
and then I did write a short story prequel and sequels, and then the whole of the Rome series. There's 4 books, which my slightly less wonderful publisher decided I needed to have a gender neutral name in the days before that was a thing, because these were after the end of the Boudica series. Britain was not a good place to be. The islands of Britain were not a happy place to be. But I had discovered that the Great Fire of Rome took place not long after the end of the Boudican revolt, and I'd left characters in Gaul explicitly for that reason, because I also discovered the historical basis for Christ, which is 3 different people whose stories have been pushed together. I thought, if I can't write a thriller based on that, I should give up and go back to the day job. So the Rome books carry on some of the surviving characters of the Boudica books, but they were written as MC Scott instead of Manda Scott, so nobody knows. Which was
Manda, this is
annoying.
This is terrible news now, because I've got stuff I need to do.
Well, they're all, they've been out for 20 years now, Sunshine. They're still going to be around.
Yeah,
they're not going anywhere.
No, but that hunger, No, so wow, that's exciting. Gosh, and some of the characters continue, and the idea that this is the story of Christ. Wow,
that got quite well hidden. There was quite a lot of, we can't really say this. You have to look quite hard for that, but I did put it in the author's note at the end, because nobody ever reads the author's note at the end, so it was okay to put it there
at the end of the final pages of the book when you're in.
First book.
Yeah. I read the author's note. I read it all in Boudica.
You're one of the 2. Yes, thank you.
Please tell me. I mean, I know this was so the first book, I think I just got it off the shelf to see which year it was. And it seems to be copyright 2003.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I started writing in 2000. It took a while to get the first one to a point where we both agreed, me and my editor agreed, that it was what it needed to be. And then after that, they were roughly one a year. So yeah.
So 25 years ago.
Yes, quarter
As of today. Yeah. Wow. So what I'd love to hear from you, Manda, is how and why you got drawn to. So we'll start. What I'd love to do, just to give a frame for the whole conversation, I'd love to talk about Boudica a little bit. I really want to hear about your process of how that came into being and what it was like for you writing that. And then I have since dug into your other work and been to your website and found out about all the other things you've been doing and listening to your podcast. So then we can go there.
Okay, brilliant. And we could get to the new book because it's oddly in this. It's in the same mindset, but it's contemporary. So yeah, that would be quite interesting, I think.
Got it here, and it's definitely coming into the conversation. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant, beautiful. Okay, so Boudica.
Yeah. So it's 25 years since I've thought about this in any great depth. I was a veterinary surgeon, is the first thing to say. So I grew up in Scotland, and I grew up in Scotland on a dual existence, parallel existences, because part of me was in vet school being good at learning stuff, which is very left brain. And the rest of me was going over to Edinburgh. I was at Glasgow Vet School. I was going over to Edinburgh every weekend to work with a group of druids in caves near Roslin. And I was studying Buddhism. I joined the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. I did everything that I could to expand what we would now think of, I would think of as heart mind, and what Ian McGilchrist would call right brain stuff. And the two didn't overlap very much. Nobody in the vet school knew what I was doing at weekends. People at weekends didn't know I was studying to be a vet. But I was doing it largely, if we take a little step back, when I was a kid, I read Rosemary Sutcliffe's Eagle of the Ninth, which I reread it ahead of writing Eagle of the 12th, which is one of the Rome books, and realised how colonial and how misogynist it was. But when I was a kid, I didn't notice that. I noticed that the young man Roman, has to go north to rescue the eagle of his father's legion because his father has been disgraced because the legion has lost their eagle. He goes north of the wall into Scotland, so where I lived. So he comes into my place, and he, with his native slave, Eska, it's so colonial and it's so projected. Anyway, let's leave that alone. They come north and they meet the seal people. And the priests of the horned moon god have definitely got Marcus's father's eagle. And they keep it in what's effectively a long barrow with a goat skin as a kind of door. And they go in, and you never see what's in past the goat skin curtain. And I was desperate. I was 8 or 9. I have to know, because I was living in this little Presbyterian village in Scotland. And that was the first time I had any idea that there were other gods, and that these are my people. Because what I was being taught was definitely not mine. And there was no one could tell me. And then Dad took me and my brother to the Brochs, which again, on Scotland, we went to the one that's at Glenelg, just opposite Skye. And it's this huge Paleolithic dwelling. It's 80 feet across or so. And the walls at the bottom, it's dry stone. And they're set far enough apart that in the winter, the cattle were between the walls. And then it curves up in this kind of beehive shape. And there were 7 stories. And so the cattle, and then the hay, and then grain, and then other stuff on the way up. And then the people lived in the middle. And we went there, and I just sat, and I could hear these whispers on the edge of my hearing. And again, these are my people. I need to know what you can teach me. And then I read Less than the Mohicans, and then I was completely lost. It's like there are people who are alive much more recently than the people in the Brochs, for whom the gods of the land are alive. And so part of me was training to be a vet, and the rest of me was desperately trying to find the answer to that question of what happens behind the goatskin curtain. How do I connect to the gods of the land? And that didn't change at all. I came down to Cambridge. I was a house surgeon at Cambridge, and then worked in Newmarket, and And I was still spending every weekend going away to anything that I could find that would help me to learn that. And there came a point where so I was learning then. There was a short window between mid 80s, early 90s, mid 80s and late 80s, really. So a lot of Native American teachers would come across because their guides and gods were telling them they needed to teach white people or we were going to destroy the world. And see what happened. And they were very free with their teaching of, we will teach you how to talk to the gods of your land using the tools that we have inherited, that are living lineage, because you lost your lineage 2,000 years ago. The Romans did destroy it. This, seventh daughter over seventh daughter stuff is bollocks, basically. There is very little left.
What's bollocks?
The seventh daughter of a seventh daughter. The idea that my granny has some kind of lineage that goes back to Druidic times and can teach me how to connect to the gods of the islands of Britain is a fantasy.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
But the indigenous peoples of the Sami from northern Finland, or the Native Americans, north and south, or Australians or Africans, the peoples who still have a living lineage, they know how to talk to the gods of the land. They know how to be an integral part of the web of life and ask it, what do you want of me? And respond. That's the nature of their being. There's a wonderful woman called Vanessa Andreotti who wrote Hospicing Modernity. And she's Brazilian. She's part indigenous, part German. And her indigenous grandfather said that the core wounding of colonialism is not the slaughter of the people and the taking of the land. Those are terrible and they are very traumatic. But the core wound is the belief in separability that our culture carries and that indigenous cultures don't. And so I was working, and then within 3 or 4 years, of course, predatory capitalism being what it is, somebody who'd been taught by some of these people, not in the UK, I have to say, but decided, pay me $1,000 and I'll teach you to be a shaman in a weekend. And they were setting up courses like that. And the doors closed quite firmly and quite fast. Not completely, but the freedom with which we were being taught was because the people who, in the native cultures who did not think it was sensible to teach us, had been saying, they're not adult. You're teaching children. They don't know how to handle this. And when the give me $1,000 and I'll teach you to be a shaman in a weekend stuff started, they went, see? And everyone else went, oh, whoa, we didn't think you were going to do that. But I had been incredibly privileged to be part of that kind of brief flowering and then to have continual teaching thereafter. And so I was being a vet, and I was learning that. And there came a point where asking what do you want of me, the answer was beginning less to be we want you to be a vet and more to be we want you to do other stuff. And what came out of we want you to do other stuff was writing. And in the beginning I wrote crime thrillers because I was working full time. I did not have time to do research. And I could write crime thrillers without doing any research because basically I had access to the pathology department. It's not hard. But then there came a point where I had a particular shamanic event, which I can tell you if you want.
Yeah,
I don't know,
please. I mean, if you want to.
Yes, no, I don't mind. I'll try and edit the highlights because. So I had lurchers at that point. We know what a lurcher is. It's a kind of dog. Yes. Okay, that's good. The Americans don't know what lurcher is. The Americans think a lurcher is a kind of homeless man, which was hilarious because for a while the bio on the back of my book said Manda lives in Suffolk with 2 lurchers and too many cats, and I realised what they thought and had. Guys,
that's hilarious.
I don't do blokes. I'm sorry, that's not what it is. Anyway, so my senior lurcher, I was walking along Newmarket Heath thinking about the next book, which was going to be a crime novel, and she caught a hare and brought it back to me. And first of all, she wasn't very good at catching hares, but this one was a doe who had recently given birth.
Wow.
And I just completely broke because hares are sacred to everything that I do. And if I couldn't find the kits in 1,000 acres of Newmarket Heath with the grass up to my knees, they weren't going to survive. And I didn't find them. I spent all day looking. So part of what I was very young. I wasn't teaching at that point, obviously. And yet I had internalized that the gods will whisper and then they will speak and then they will shout. And if you get to the point where they are shouting at you, you're going to wish you'd learned to listen a bit earlier. And this was, as far as I was concerned, this was pretty much of a shout. So I went and sat under a tree in Thetford Forest, which was near to where I lived, and this was a hazel tree that literally it would have taken 6 or 7 people to get their arms around. It was huge. And it was my sit spot at the time. And I took the dogs, because I lived on my own, I wanted to look after them, and sat under the tree asking, what do you want of me? And the answer came very quickly, and I argued a lot, which is very stupid, and I teach all my students not to do that, because I didn't think I could do it. And in the end, I kind of said, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to see, I had enough money to last till the end of the month. And then I was going to have to go back to the day job full time. And okay, I'll
till
give it a
the
go.
end of the month.
At that point, I'd
a few
pulled
weeks
off.
worth.
Yes, a few weeks worth. And I went home and I called the only person I knew who wrote historical fiction. And she said, well, you can't do this at all because your publishers won't let you. You are now a crime novelist, and the crime novel I just written had been shortlisted for an Edgar, so I was doing okay. And he said, that's your branding, they won't let you change. And anyway, if there was enough to write about Boudica, I would already have done it, and there isn't, and I haven't, so you can't. Oh. But I'd made a promise under the tree, and I wasn't stupid enough to decide I couldn't keep the promise. So, and I lived near Cambridge. I worked at Cambridge, and I had access to the library, the anthropology library, the history library, the archaeology library, everything. There were more shelves of books on Roman military history around the Boudican era than there were in the entire vet school library on anesthesia. So I just immersed myself in all this stuff. And by the end of not very long, I had a 23-page synopsis, and mostly a synopsis is 300 words if you're lucky.
By the end of the month?
Easy, like by the end of the week.
Wow.
And then before the end of the month, I went to Crime Scene 2000. So we know it was 2000 in London, crime thing. And I was on a panel with 3 or 4 other people, and some gorgeous person in the audience said, so what are you writing next? Which is every writer's favorite question if you ever want to know what to ask, because publishing cycles being what they are, the book that you are selling to people is the one that you wrote 18 months ago. And it's nice, but the one you're working on now is what really matters. So this person asked, what are you writing next? And my editor was in the audience, and we had a big fallout. And really just to piss her off, I said, I'm writing a series about Boudica, because she'd said, no, we don't want Boudica. History doesn't sell. We want you to write the sequel to the one that just got shortlisted for an Edgar, sorry. In writing terms, an Edgar is an Oscar. So I just kind of said that to piss her off. And I got a little bit more money. We sold the rights to Germany, so the money was eking out. And that September, I was at Dead on Deansgate, another big crime festival, and came down off my panel, and someone came up to me and said, I was in the audience when you said that at Dead on Deansgate. Have you got anything? I thought, well, I've got 3 chapters and a synopsis. Why? And she said, well, I've just started at Transworld and they want me to take on a big series. Would you send it to me? Yeah. Wow. And so by the time my money ran out, like I had about 5 days before I was really going to have to go and start begging people for a proper job. They bought it for more money than I'd ever seen before, which doesn't say much. The previous people were not paying very much for the books, but still, it was enough to give up the day job.
That is amazing, isn't it? So all before the end of the month? Totally.
No, I'd got more money. More money just kept dribbling in, just enough to keep me. So it was...
it all worked out.
It was pretty much March till September in the end. It was 6 months total, but it worked. And then... amazing stuff. We were working, my editor was great, and she said there are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are Romans and there are Celts, Britons. And most of the publishing industry is Romans, so we're only going to fight the battles we know how to win. So, okay, I hear you. And one of the ones, so I had this idea of a cover. Garth Nix had just had the Sabriel cover, which was gorgeous. And then they'd just done new covers for Lord of the Rings, which are really, really classy covers. They're just basically a coloured sigil on a black background. And I said, I want that. And here's the image that I want. And she went, I don't think this is a battle we can win, but let's see. And she went into they have big meetings about covers. And she went into the cover meeting and said, I'm not sure about this. And a guy at the end of the table put his hand up and said, oh, well, I designed those covers when I was with the other publisher that I've just left to join you. I would really enjoy designing covers for Boudica. And she just came out and went, we won that battle. Yeah. So amazing. We got the covers that we wanted. It was good. It was really good.
So Boudica is, I mean, so you said there that there wasn't much about her
No,
available.
I said that my friend told me there
Oh,
wasn't
that
much because my
okay.
friend had only ever bothered, sorry, lovely though she is, to read Tacitus. And
Okay.
there's a paragraph or two. There's a
Mm.
little bit more if you bother to dig, but there's a paragraph that is the Boudican speech. It's a little bit longer, but there's a very little bit, and it's all about the revolt. And I
Mm.
knew that I had to write who we were before the Romans came, because the whole point was if we can see who we've been, we can see who we could be if we let go of all the predatory capital death cult stuff that Rome imposed on us. So I had
I
to go back.
so this is so interesting because I've been listening to podcasts of you speaking about lots of things, and in particular your latest book, which we will come to. But as somebody asked you on a podcast, so this was very much a strategic move, um, like, and we'll go there, and you can tell us about that. But it
All
seems
my
to
books have
me,
been political,
yes,
yes.
that they are
Yes,
that there's a strategic
totally.
already
But
there.
even the crime novels, I was writing
Okay,
lesbian crime novels at a point where the
yeah.
only other person doing that was Val McDermott,
Uh-huh.
and we had a very different approach to that. Somebody wrote after the latest one came out, wrote me a really cross email saying your book is too political. It's sunshine. Every single book I've ever written has been political. You just haven't noticed.
Yeah,
So
good.
yeah, no, it was but it was strategic because what I got under the tree was this will change the world. These books will
Yeah,
change the world. And I genuinely thought, I told my editor, it's extremely likely that I will go under a bus
yeah.
after we finish this because this is what I'm here to do. And then I am trusting you to get these sold. And obviously I didn't. And there are other things still to do. But I genuinely believed that would be the case. And what actually happened was that after the first book came out, I ended up teaching because I said to everyone, this is who we are, this is who we could be, it's
Yeah.
all in the book. And then people were not quite understanding how to do it from the book, which confused me a bit. But anyway,
Can
so I started
you're
teaching
referring to the dreaming,
the
yeah,
dreaming,
which
yes.
please, everyone listening, go and read the books so you know exactly what's, if you haven't read them, you need to read them. You absolutely need to read them. And the dreaming
The
is
dreaming
a
is,
huge part. I mean,
yes,
it's the whole thing.
because it arose out of, so for me, I call shamanic practice dreaming partly because it makes it more clear, I think, and it gets it away. Everybody thinks shamanic practice is about smoking drugs or
Mm,
drinking drugs or whatever. And for
mm,
me, it's not. It's about finding ways to access all of the other realities, which are far, far, far bigger than our reality. And you
mm,
can do that while you're asleep and you
mm,
can dream while you're awake. So I teach now shamanic dreaming, dreaming awake,
mm.
as a direct result of having gone around the country telling people that they just needed to read the books and then realizing it wasn't working. So it's over 20 years since we started teaching, and I
And
thought I would teach a couple, and now it's a small
amazing.
industry in its own
Yeah, it
right.
sounds incredible. I mean, I've listened to you talking about, you know, the cycle of teachings. It
Yeah.
sounds like you've had, yeah, a 16-year cycle or something. Is that right? The
Well,
full
it
cycle.
technically it should take 11 years, but
Uh,
nobody's done it in less than 16. So yeah,
oh,
partly
amazing.
because lockdown gets in the way.
Yeah.
There's always something. You can't necessarily come to something once a year every year for 11 years. So yeah.
Mm. So what was it like? I mean, you've I'm very aware that you wrote these books a quarter of a century ago, but for me, they're so
Thank you.
fresh. Um, and also so poignant because I didn't know I was hungry for that. I didn't know.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
did not know how hungry I was. I mean, personally speaking, Manda, I am a complete mongrel. And in fact, so I say that because I didn't really ever feel much connection to the British Isles, despite
Okay.
having grown up here all my life. You know, we all move around, don't we? Like you've
Mm,
moved all over. I wasn't from the place I grew up. Not many people I knew were.
right.
I didn't feel any connection to the landscape there in the Severn Vale above Bristol. I mean, I just didn't feel it somehow.
Mm,
I enjoyed nature and being out in nature as a child. I spent a lot of time out in nature, but yeah, I think I just, because I knew one of my grandfather was actually native Innu from
wow.
Labrador.
Wow.
And so that was interesting, which was hidden from us. I never knew that until after. later, because it was not a thing that he wanted to talk about.
Right.
So I never talked to him about it, sadly.
Gosh.
So anyway, this whole thing about culture and what I said was I didn't know how hungry I was for these books, and the reason that they struck me so hard was because you're talking about our native, shamanic,
Pre-colonial culture.
pre-colonial culture.
Yeah.
And another funny thing, I think another thing that just I loved them even more. I've always said, as kind of a joke between me and my partner, that I'm allergic to straight lines. I hate them. I honestly
Right.
hate them. Just like
Right.
we've got this very square house with a very square garden and everything. The previous woman who lived here, bless her, she made everything very square, and it was, just so, with a square greenhouse, and everything is square, and I actually find it very stressful. So I say all this, and you're already nodding and knowing where this
Full-on
is
trauma
going.
culture. Yes.
Interesting, yeah,
Because we were designed to live in circles.
tell
Roundhouses.
us about that, because that's what.
Well, I think your experience tells us about that.
Yeah.
And I remember a long time ago listening to a podcast, like at least a decade ago, when podcasts weren't really a thing, of someone Chinese talking to someone American and saying, because the American was getting very afraid of the fact that China was going to rule the world and take over by force of arms, and the Chinese said, we've had an empire for thousands of years, and we have never moved out and conquered the rest of the world, and it's not because we couldn't. And what they said was, we who live in round spaces think differently, and you will never understand because you live in square spaces. And I think I think China is a very interesting space, and let's not get too lost in there, because the indigenous culture and trauma culture doesn't map onto that space nearly as well. But I think for us, 300,000 years of human evolution, if we want to go further back till we were hydrogen boiling in the sun, there are not things in the natural world. There are very few actual straight lines.
Right. Yeah.
There's something about when whatever it is that cut us off from our knowing of being an integral part of the web of life,
Yeah.
we wanted to control. And the way you control things is you box them in. And we box in ourselves. There's a really interesting guy whose name I always forget, but he did his PhD on the fact that humans in cities exhibit exactly the same psychosis as animals in zoos. And we've done this. There's a book by Christopher Ryan called Civilized to Death, and we are in the process of destroying our souls by our desperate need to control the living world. And in fact, we're destroying the living world because we've decided we can control it so completely that it doesn't even need to be there. There's a significant proportion of Silicon Valley that thinks, quotes, nature, and I hate that, the othering of that, is an aesthetic option. And if it's an aesthetic option, you can do without it. And it's functionally insane. But these are also people who think they're going to live forever. They've sold for death. They live in they read way too many science fiction novels as kids, and they have not grown out of it. And that's a whole other conversation. But we're designed to live in round spaces. And if you go and spend time in a yurt or a roundhouse or a teepee or any of those things, your soul mine certainly just relaxes out into the space. Oh, yes, this is home. This is where I belong. And Rome brought the trauma culture to the islands of Britain. I mean, I don't think they invented it. They just happened to be really good at exporting it. And later, Britain became really good at exporting it.
Yeah. Right. And that's absolutely what happens in the Boudica series. I mean, the contrast between the time in the novel spent with the Romans and then the time spent with
before that,
the Britons. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Okay, I feel like I could talk about this the whole time, but I'm very aware that I want to move on and hear about your later work. And you mentioned there about the trauma culture. and I've heard you speak about this a number of times, and as a result, I heard you, as a comparison to the initiation culture. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. Try not to get too lost in it. So the idea comes from Francis Weller, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And he learned from Malidoma Somé, who wrote Of Water and the Spirit. So we need to honor the lineage of this.
Yeah.
And Francis Weller is a trauma therapist. I don't really like the nomenclature, to be honest. I think trauma culture already triggers people who are in the trauma culture. And it would be good to find other words. However, leaving that aside, so initiation culture, 300,000 years of evolution as humans, and however long we want to go, 64 million to the last mass extinction. As soon as we became self-conscious, we know ourselves to be an integral part of the web of life. And I think that's part of the point of being human, is to be the self-conscious nodes in the wide mesh of life. When I was before I began to set up Accidental Gods, the visions that set that up,
That's Manda's podcast.
It's also a membership program.
And the membership
came first.
Okay.
Faith and I sit with the fire every winter solstice, and I sat with the fire, and the visions that came at that particular winter solstice were of that vision of the earth as seen from space, that blue pearl floating in the blackness of space. And all around it was this intricate, vast, uncountable number of strands mesh web all around it, Indra's net all around it. And what I was told was that at each crossing point of these very, very fine fibers of light was a point of consciousness. And some of these are human and most of them are not. And then I was given a couple of other images. It took me a while to work out what that one meant. The thing about writing Boudica was really clear text. And clear text has happened very rarely in life. And the start of Accidental Gods was not clear text at all. Anyway, that mesh, I think part of what we are here for is to be self-conscious nodes in the web of life, to be aware that this is what we are. And again, I think Tyson Yunkaporta, in his latest book, Right Story, Wrong Story, says something. He tells a story of the adults are making a dugout canoe, and the kids are playing on a bend on the north bank of the river, jumping in and out of the water. And he says, because today it is safe, and tomorrow it won't be, the crocodiles will be here. And he goes on to say, we the indigenous peoples of Australia, don't have that Paleolithic fight and flight response that you all talk about, because we know where the predators are, always. And so much of our concept of who we were before modernity took over is utter bollocks, because it's projections of what we think the peasants, or not us, but the straight white Oxbridge men who make these decisions look at the peasants of their time and assume that everybody was a peasant and therefore it was bad, and it wasn't. Indigenous peoples are a bit like Douglas Adams talks about dolphins in his wonderful Hitchhiker's Guide series, and he says humans think they're more intelligent than dolphins because they invented New York and nuclear bombs and wars and cities and so forth, and dolphins think they're much more intelligent than humans for exactly the same reason. And it's the same with indigenous people. Again, Vanessa Andreotti wanted to marry a man of Spanish descent, and her indigenous side said, no, you can't, because he'll get bitten by a snake, as in he won't know where the predators are, and he won't know how to laugh. Because if you talk to anyone who's lived amongst indigenous people who have not been totally traumatized by our culture, they laugh all the time, and they're not laughing inappropriately. They're laughing because their hearts are genuinely singing with joy, because they are an integral part of the web of life, which is raw compassion, and they know themselves to be that. So the hallmarks of an initiation culture are that the individuals within it undergo intermittent, episodic, contained encounters with death. And the containment is held by the elders and the shamans, by the tribe, but mostly by the web of life. And so the individual gets to the edges of themselves where death is a genuine possibility, and they ask for help. And if they ask for help and are able to receive and embody that help, then they survive. And if they can't and they don't, then they don't. And this is not considered a terrible thing, because everybody, Caesar said of the Celts that fighting them was really hard, the Britons even, because they see death as taking off a shirt.
Yeah.
as in you just can come back again, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to fight people who don't care about dying.
Wow.
So if you can embody that help, you grow and you come back to the people, whatever the contained encounter with death has been. So birth, the act of giving birth is a contained encounter with death for the mother and the child. I don't think infant mortality was anything like we have been told that it was, and we can discuss that if you want. But even so, it's a contained encounter with death. And then throughout life, there are more and more of these. I'm going to stop for a minute because it's glitching quite a lot. Are you getting glitches, or is it just
You just flashed, but I think it's okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'll have it out. So what we come back to is a knowing of who I am and that I can ask for help at any moment. And it's a reciprocal thing. It's not, I'm not like a child going, gimme, gimme, gimme. I am knowing that help will be asked of me as well as offered to me.
Yes.
And I come back into a community of people knowing who I am, knowing what it is that I am good at, knowing what's mine to do.
Yeah.
And I'm surrounded by people who know what's theirs to do. And I can take pride, genuine good pride, not hubris pride, but I am good at this because it's what's mine to do. And because it's mine to do, I am good at it. And I can ask for help to do it. And I am surrounded by people that I respect and who respect me. So I live in this reciprocal flow of pride and respect, going from between the human and the more than human world. I feel respected by the gods of the land and the spirits of the trees and the rocks and the rain.
Yeah.
And so I live in this sense of knowing my place in the world. And it's beautiful. And that's the serotonin mesh. You know, if we look at the cognitive neuroscience of networks of enhancement, serotonin is a big reward mesh in our brain. And serotonin reward meshes they're typified by their long duration and their additive.
Yeah.
Our culture, something happened 10 to 12,000 years ago, and a portion of humanity lost that knowing of being an integral part of the web of life. Because it's impossible to conduct the Western style of agriculture, which is enslavement of the web of life, both the plants and the animals, if you know yourself to be an integral part. We know that all of the other continents, the Americas, Australia, Africa, the Amazon, they're all managed landscapes, managed by people, but the people are managing them in harmony with the web of life. They're not saying, this is my field and I will kill anybody who tries to take my turnips from it. Or this is my cow and I am going to make it pull a plough for the rest of its life, whatever else it wants to do. I'm going to take its children away from it the day they're born. I'm going to treat it as if it were a mechanical thing because I don't care, because it's other. Yeah. And I, in the trauma culture, live in this concept of scarcity and separation and powerlessness, which is entirely other than we evolved to do. And so we don't have the contained encounters with death. We just have trauma that stacks and stacks and stacks until it overflows. We don't have the serotonin mesh of pride and respect with the community of people and the more than human world. We have this desperate need for dopamine hits. And dopamine is characterized by being very short term. It's not additive, and it's subject to the laws of diminishing returns. So there is no way that the boxes from Amazon or the porn or the cocaine or the alcohol or the sugar or sending rockets to Mars or buying up yet another democracy or whatever it is that one does to try and fill the void inside, it's not going to work.
What? It's not going to work?
Yeah, exactly.
Those Amazon boxes.
No, exactly. Yet another box from Amazon. Please stop buying from Amazon. People just never buy from Amazon ever again. God. It's never going to fill the void inside. And you know this. That's what the whole of your podcast is about. Yeah. But people don't. And I think we are now seeing the extinction behaviors of the end of the predatory capital death cult, and it might destroy us. Yes. Or we step out of it. And so then this all got to, the latest book was a very explicit instruction from the Web of Life sitting on the hill to write a way forward for now. Because with the Boudica books, I was trying to show a pre-colonial way of being connected to the web of land. And I really thought that if everybody read this, they'd all just do it and we'd drop our Romanization and we'd be fine. And it didn't quite work out like that. So this one is much more explicit Okay, guys, you can see how we could do this because this is set in a recognizable version of the world.
It is
and you
explicit.
can see what you need to do.
I love it. When I wrote to you, Manda, and asked if you wanted if you would come on the podcast, you said, yeah, have you read Any Human Power? And I said, no, I've ordered it. It's on its way, not from Amazon, of course. And and I have since read it, and it is quite something. I mean, yeah, wow. I mean, I don't know where to start. What I think I found amazing, so the book is Any Human Power. I've got it here. I'll just hold it up in case people are watching the video version. And it's got a lovely crow on the cover.
Yes. Yeah, I love that cover. So grateful.
Such a nice cover. Yeah. And nice colours. Viridian. I think that colour is Viridian. That's my daughter's middle name. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like in between blue and green on the colour wheel. Yeah. Anyway, random aside. So yeah, what is extraordinary about this book? I mean, there's a lot that's extraordinary about it. There's a lot in it. I mean, I've never really, it's so, the amount of research, and I think this is what am I correct in thinking that your podcast was the research?
Well, I didn't know that it was, but I knew once I started that if I hadn't been doing the podcast, I would have had no.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
The spirits on the hill said you need to do this, and I'm thinking
the podcast.
No, well, yes,
the book.
The podcast first, but then the book was a whole other set of instructions, and I genuinely would not have had a clue if I hadn't been doing the podcast, which is why we also set up something we called the Throughtopia Masterclass.
Yes.
Because part of the instruction was also it needs not to be just you writing this.
Yes.
We need as many writers as we can, or creatives of any sort, to be mapping ways forward that will actually work instead of the dystopias that are being lived out around us just now.
So the point, so it's a Throughotopian novel which starts in a recognizable present day scenario, and then a series of remarkable things happen, and the end result is,
the idea is that a Throughtopia, from my definition of a Throughtopia, again, we need to honour Rupert Reed, who coined the term in a 2017 post on Huffington Post, and his concept of Throughtopia and mine is somewhat different, but he did give me permission to use it for the Throughtopia Masterclass. And then the book is clearly in the same vein. So my definition of a Throughtopia is that exactly that starts in a recognizable present and creates, crafts, lays out roadmaps through to a future that we would be proud to leave to the generations that come after us. And that's got to be the key. I want the grandchildren's grandchildren of this generation to look back at us and go, yes, they did it. They did it. They left it way too late. Way too late. And it took a long time before they realized what they needed to do. But once they did, they got together, they coalesced around a suite of common values with common aims, and they made them happen. And so there we need to know how we can do that. We need to see step by step by step, because dystopias, as we've said, dystopias, please, anyone listening, don't write dystopias.
Oh my gosh.
Anyone I've ever known who writes a dystopia, they think if just they can describe how bad it's going to be, everybody will change their mind. And that's not how cognitive neuroscience works. Frightening people into behavioral change has never worked unless you let them see and feel what the other behaviors might be. You've got to give people agency. I have 4 things, and it spells MADE: motivation, agency, direction, and empowerment. If you don't have each of those 4 things, you will not get behavior change. And so dystopias are never going to work, because by definition, a dystopia does not give you the direction, the agency, the motivation, and the empowerment. Utopias also might give you a light at the end of the tunnel, but they don't show you the tunnel. And so they're not any more useful. So if we're going to get there, we need to see the steps. And of course, there are as many ways to get there as there are people on the planet. But I just wrote one that could work.
Yeah, and if anybody who's got, this is why I'm absolutely amazed by you, Manda, and why I'm so inspired, really, because I think I've got this. I've always had, well, not always, but for the last, I don't know, 6 years or so, as I've been building my business, I've had this tendency to just really want to empower people. You know, I've had this message that seems to come from somewhere, don't know where, change the world, like change the world. We need to change our inner
Yes.
beliefs.
Yes.
And that's my like that's what I do. I help people to rewire their internal narrative and blah blah blah.
It's good. Don't do it down. You
No,
help people to
I don't want to
rewire
do
their
it down. I'm
internal
just
narrative.
so aware
It's
of the
seriously important. Are you going to have to cut off at
No, I
at an
don't
hour?
have to cut off. No.
That's
So
fine.
okay, you're all right, are you?
Yeah,
Good.
I'm fine.
Oh, good. I get nervous about time because I'm not a person, like I said, lines and straight, you know, don't tend to abide by.
No, exactly. No, me either. So it's fine.
Okay, good. Where was I going with that?
Your business is about empowering people.
Yes, and changing their inner story. And, you know, this sense of often, you know, this lack of, lack. I think you mentioned lack. Did you mention
scarcity,
lack?
separation, and powerlessness? Yes, that sense of there not being enough stuff.
Yes, always never enough. And that's like, you know, people come to me with, I think they resonate with, because I've got this, my natural tendency is to say, it's so positive. It's almost, and then I feel I can go into a bit of a shame thing about that. Like, you know, it's too big, it's too much. I want to change the whole world. Right. Like, I can never do that on my own, but by empowering all these people who've got their own visions of what's possible, and by just helping them to believe in their own thing, then we've got a chance. So where was I going with this? Well, while I'm thinking about that, did you ever feel self-doubt when you were how do you work with that?
By honoring that part. I now do, my therapy is internal family systems, so it's given me more language for that, but I always did this anyway. It's just that I didn't know this is what I was doing. I honor that part. Yes, you're right. I might be writing the biggest heap of shit anyone's ever seen, and nobody might want to read it. That's always possible. But it helps that I had a really clear instruction from the gods and the guides that I work with that I needed to do this. So I don't get to say no. Actually, so that part is, you know, I don't get to say no, so let's just do the best we can. And the thing about writing is it's always a process of pouring stuff onto the page and coming back tomorrow and going, well, that is actual rubbish. But we can, you know, and by 10 days from now it might not be, and sometimes it just has to go, but that the thing about writing is it's a constant iterative process. So the bit that's going, that is absolute rubbish, is actually really useful for honing, because if it gets to the point where he goes, no, that might not be total rubbish, then we keep it for a little while and see if it fits and keeps going. So it's giving that part, letting that part be strong at what it's good at, and having the absolute conviction that this is what I need to do.
Yeah, beautiful.
Makes it
and
easier.
The part, I mean, I love the whole concept of the internal family systems and the parts, and I use that
really empowering. It's
in
so
my
shamanic
work too. Right. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, it feels it to me, possibly the way that I do it, and I have a therapist who's also trained with some of the same shamanic teachers as me, so that's very useful. We only discovered that along the way, but I suppose we can make it very shamanic, because parts, you can relate to parts. I relate to parts in a very similar way to which I relate to guides and gods.
You want to say any more about that?
Well, I don't know if I can really, because it becomes, I have a very strong internal modality. So if I'm going into a vision, what I would call a dreaming space, to talk to a part, and giving it agency and allowing it to express what it needs to express, it's not significantly different to going up the hill and talking to the hill. And giving it agency and letting it express, or, you know, in that space between waking and sleeping, going out into a semi dream landscape that has some anchors in reality, and inviting in what wants to come and giving them agency, and it's a very similar process.
Beautiful. Oh, and so, I mean, so juicy and rich, and so much that I could ask about it, but I'd like to come back to any human power, because What I found the most, I mean, it's hard to, when you're a novelist, you must talk about your books all the time. How much do you give away from the plot?
Well, I wouldn't give away the kind of arc of the
Yeah.
thriller. A tweet was sent and it triggered a certain number of things, and we
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily give away what it triggers. But the rest, the fact that the main character dies at the end of the second chapter, I talk about all the time,
Yeah.
because that was given me on the hill
Yeah.
when
Okay.
I was doing the visioning. That I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but it turned into that.
Yeah.
I was given that first scene and
Yeah.
the void walks, which I can talk about
Yeah.
those. And the fact that it combines, I'm calling it a mytho-political thriller. I'm trying to create a new mythology because
Yeah.
all of our mythology arises out of the trauma culture. What happens? What does
Yeah.
it look like? One of my big questions for now is, what does a 21st century initiation culture look and feel like? Because we're not going back to being forager hunters. That's not a thing. But if we're going to go forward, I think we have to go forward in a way that heals the trauma. We have to do the work individually and collectively and reconnect with the web of life.
Manda, as you're talking, I'm just going to tell you this because I feel like it's so beautiful. I've just caught out the corner of my eye up on the hill. There's a blue sky, it's very sunny, and there is a red kite which is circling.
I thought it might be. That's so
Did
cool.
you?
Yeah, because I feed the kites here periodically, so I fed them
Yeah.
just before I came up. So there were actually quite a lot out there, and yeah, red kites are amazing. And they,
Yeah.
go talk to the kites. Really,
I
go talk to the
do
kites.
actually.
Right. And they're
Yeah.
an amazing source of wisdom and connection and clarity. They clear things out. It's, yeah. they're
Oh
very
wow,
cool.
fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that, but I feel like I'm desperately trying to bring it back to any human power because we're
thank you.
giving little snippets of what happens. So perhaps we can come back to kites or not, but yeah, so the main character dies at the end of chapter 2.
Yep.
And do you want to give a brief
Yep. Okay. So this is
your synopsis? Yeah.
yes, Vision on the Hill, and what I was given was the scene where a 60-something-year-old woman is lying on a bed and her 15-year-old grandson is at her side, and he says, "When you come home, can we go up the hill and watch the crows go to bed?" Which is exactly what I was doing. So I had been told while teaching that I had to do a number of things, which are too long to talk about, and sit in a particular place, in a particular frame of mind for at least an hour as the sun goes down every night. That was the instruction. So I did. And this was during lockdown, summer solstice 2021. And so part of the instruction was to get a particular object in a particular place, and it took a while to get that. So by the end of July, I was sitting every night as the sun goes down for an hour. And it was beautiful. And I was watching the crows go to bed. And then a series of visions that gave me this book and the really clear instruction that I needed to write it, because I thought I had given up writing. I thought it was it took too long to get a book from the idea to the whole process of writing and editing and getting it out into the world is years.
Yeah.
And I was doing the podcast. Why would I need to do that? And then, no, you need to, nobody else is writing the way through, and you need to do that. I didn't have the word Throughtopia at that point. And so the scene is, Lan is lying there. Finn says, "Can we go home and watch the crows go to bed?" And she says, "No, I'm not coming home. We've had this conversation. I'm dying. There is no coming home from here." And he is completely broken. He lives with her and her wife, who died recently, so it was only him and her. And he says, "You're the only one who gets me. I don't want to live in a world with you not in it." And she realizes he's serious. And she says, "I don't know what's coming next, but if you really need me and you call, I will do whatever I can to come to you. I'm not leaving you. I promise." And he and she and we all feel the gods pause in their labors and look down and go, "Okay, that was a promise. You are held to that." And then she dies. And then the rest of the book is told from her perspective of having to keep that promise. And she's caught in the kind of interstitial liminal space between the lands of life and the lands of death, which is quite a well-known in shamanic practice. One of the functions of a tribal shaman is psychopumping, which is to lead the souls of those newly dead to where they need to go, and this is the interstitial space that you traverse. So is a
The
space that
bardos.
yes, exactly, know quite well. So so Lan is locked there, and then she has to discover how to have agency. So the other thing that I saw on the hill was she goes 3 times into the void, and the void is again a shamanic space that you do not visit without extreme need and in the company of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, because Lan is dead and she's terrified of this place, and she is aware, or is told by the crow that is her teacher, that if she screws up here, death is not she's already dead. Death is not what happens. What happens is total annihilation. You simply cease to exist, and this would not be a good thing.
Yeah.
So with due trepidation, she goes 3 times into the void, and the first time is to the aim of the void, the point of the void as it is in the book, which is one specific instance, is if you can hone your intent cleanly and clearly and powerfully enough, you can split time and see as many as necessary of the options of what might be going to arise from your standpoint of your splitting of time. What you can't see is something that hasn't arisen yet. So the other implication is, if you can do that, if you can then enter the lands of the living, you may be able to create a timeline that does not exist yet. So she goes to the void. The timeline is split for her by the crow, and she sees all the ways that Finn does kill himself, or she sees a number of ways Finn does kill himself. And then she's kicked back into the lands of the living with the option of, well, you don't want that to happen, see what you can do. And she has to find out how she can take agency. And then later in the book, twice more she goes into the void, and once is for the movement that is growing around her family, a global movement aiming towards creating a whole new system on the grounds that the existing system is not fit for purpose. And then the third time is for the whole of humanity, where she sees the ways that the humanity could just drive the bus off the edge of the cliff. And yet there is still time to turn it. And I still believe that to be true. The system is not fit for purpose, and we do need a global movement. And how do we bring it together is still a big question.
Yeah, beautiful. It is a big question, and I love that. I love the whole concept of the throughtopian. When I went to your website after reading Boudica and kind of stumbled across all of this, I was like, my mouth was just hanging open. I was like, I'm just gonna swear. Fuck, this is it. Like, yes.
Are you allowed to swear in your podcast?
Yeah, of course I'm allowed to swear. Okay. I just have to tick the tick the explicit.
Yeah.
I think it's all adults anyway. I can do what I want. So creating a world we're proud to leave behind for future generations. That was what came through for you. That we need to do that. That we need to do that.
And that it's possible. We have all the answers. Possible. I think that's the big thing. Nothing in the book isn't already happening or isn't about to happen. I had one of the best emails that I had. There's a person that I venerate as God, basically, is Audrey Tang, who used to be the digital minister of Taiwan and is now ambassador at large for cybersecurity. And she and Glenn Vile have written a book together called Plurality. And Glenn and Audrey wrote to me and said, we don't know how you managed to write your book unless you hacked our brains. Oh, thank you. No, I didn't.
Did you hack her brain?
No, I didn't. But I did look at exactly what she'd done in Taiwan and then map it forward. Wow. It's not hard.
Not amazing.
The principles are there. And all I did was bring it into the UK and then say, okay, and so what's the obvious next few steps? And everything in the book is being done somewhere in the world. They just haven't all been brought together in one unified political whole.
And that's it takes the artists, the creatives, the visionaries to pave the way somehow, to put that forward, and for somebody to have that breadth of vision, and just to piece it together in that way. I mean, your mind is phenomenal.
Been told.
Who's that? What's that animal you're stroking?
It's River. He just needs to come and talk when I'm on the Zoom. It's easier to just let him, because otherwise he just makes a lot of noise.
A lovely grey fluffy cat.
Yeah, he's
by the look of it.
Yeah, this is Jill. Yes, and I think this is the thing that we have to get across. We have a political system that is in its death throes, and we're watching, and it might spark the Third World War. But there's a wonderful thing that Amitav Ghosh said, which I only discovered after I'd written the book, which was future generations looking back may well hold politicians and bureaucrats culpable for their failure to act in the Great Derangement, which is now, as they should. But more, they will hold artists and creatives and writers culpable because it's not the job of politicians and bureaucrats to imagine different futures.
Yeah.
And I would say, this is not Amitav Ghosh, if they were capable of imagining different futures, they would not have their jobs.
Yeah.
The system is designed to perpetuate the system, and it does it really well. And the system is not fit for purpose,
which is why it's so boring.
That purpose is the continuation of complex life on Earth.
Yeah.
We have to stop believing that we'll just elect the right people and they'll sort it, because they don't know how. They genuinely don't have the tools.
No, they don't know how.
But we have the tools.
Yes.
And we can do the whole Buckminster Fuller thing of creating a different system that renders the existing system obsolete, which is basically what I'm doing in the book, is how do we create that parallel system?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I just think your mind is phenomenal, man. I'm like, how? I just was, again, like mouth hanging open reading this book. I was not expecting it to go where it went, and just like,
oh, thank you. That's good. That's always
wow. How have you? Yeah, I mean, I always get a bit intimidated by people with minds like
it's
that.
not hard. No, honestly, all I am is a magpie. I've had the privilege of 5 years of every week talking to someone who is doing the stuff that we need to do. That's the point of the podcast, is who is doing this.
Yeah.
And then I just have to bring it all together. It's not complicated. Well, I mean, it was quite hard.
It is hard. I'm sorry.
It's a lot harder than writing historical novels, but it wasn't impossible. And we're facing extinction. And I don't think people have got their heads around that yet.
Well,
we are heading to extinction. The idea that plucky bands of humans will survive while 93% of everything else dies is not a thing.
Yeah.
And so it's up, if I can imagine a way forward, I have to do that. And everybody else can imagine ways forward too. We just need to agree on the values.
Yeah.
And then we need to agree on the ask. And since writing the book, I wrote a Substack on Monday, which I will send you, because I think it's where I am at the moment. But basically, the fundamental ask. So the values, I think, are compassion, courage, integrity, generosity of spirit. We need to be the best of ourselves. We need to stop being tribal. And then the ask is clean air, clean water, clean soil. Clean, clear, courageous, compassionate connections within all parts of ourselves. So we need to do the inner work of healing between ourselves and each other. So we need to do the work of working. How do we actually create communities of place, purpose, and passion that actually work?
Yeah.
And then between ourselves and the web of life, we need to heal that rift. And it's not impossible.
No.
It really isn't. I'm teaching shamanic students. Oh, I'm not anymore because my senior apprentices, but I'm teaching accidental gods members and the senior students I'm teaching still. Yeah. None of this is impossible. And the inner work of healing we could do now. We just, our triggers are what let us know where we get healed. And I'm assuming that most of us are feeling triggers quite a lot just now. Yeah. So every time we get triggered, we go, I see you. Yeah. How do I heal that part?
Yeah.
How do I help that part to thaw out? Thomas Hubel says that our
I love Thomas Hubel.
traumas, exactly, are a moment frozen in time. So how do I thaw those bits? How do I hold them in compassion? Because we have to. Because it's not optional not to anymore.
It's not optional, is it? We have to grow the fuck up. I've already sworn once, so I'm swearing again.
Yes. And yes, grow the fuck up. I absolutely. I'm not a great fan of Wilbur Smith and all of of the Ken Wilber and the spiral dynamics, but what is it? Wake up, show up, clean up, grow up. That's not a bad.
I used to love Ken Wilber. I haven't delved into him for a while, but
even so, wake up, show up, clean up, grow up. Yes,
right. Yeah,
it's all a bit optional not to.
No, it's all a bit.
And pretending that the predatory capital death cult is going to somehow get us through this by monetizing the apocalypse is not a thing.
No.
It can't.
What can people do? Just to finish, Manda, I mean, I adore this whole conversation, and it's so where I'm at. You know, I mean, a couple of recommendations of books that I've read that I've got from you and your podcast. I've just finished Maladoma's book.
Oh, right. Of Water and the Spirit.
Of Water and the Spirit. Wow.
Right. Yes.
I mean, and just been, I don't know, I can't tell where I've got all this inspiration, whether it's come from you or whether it's come from different sources.
No.
But just it seems so alive in me right now because the work I do is about growing people up, but they don't see it as that, but that's what happens. And
They'll see it as that now, you
yes, they
realize?
see it. They see it
You are out there now.
retrospectively. They
Okay,
see
good.
it as
Yeah,
that, but
okay.
that's not what people don't tend to come to me saying, I really want to grow up.
No,
Because
no.
that's not a
It'd be
thing like what you were
nice.
saying. It's not what was that what you were saying, or is that someone else? God. About people don't want to hear. I can't remember. You said people don't want to hear something. About where they are. It's not
I don't think
comfortable to
people
make.
want to hear where we are as a species.
Yes.
It's really hard, and there's a tendency to shoot the messenger. You know, the whole of the right is basing
Yeah.
its offer on the current system is broken,
Mm.
and if we all go back to the 1950s, it'll be fine. And you cannot deny your way out of biophysical reality. You know, Bannon
Yeah.
is not going to get his 10,000-year Reich because we've got 3 to 4 degrees of warming baked in if we don't
Mm.
actually stamp on the brakes now. And stamping on the brakes does
Mm.
not mean building carbon capture and storage plants so you can carry on emitting the carbon that we're emitting now. First of all, it's not all about the carbon, and second, you stop the emissions. You actually
Mm.
just stop the extraction.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast a while back with some woman in Canada who's saying she went to one of the big fossil fuel meetings, and they're all talking about carbon capture and storage and reducing, you know, petrol vehicles on the roads, and she's going, why don't we just stop taking the stuff out of the ground? And all these men
Yeah.
in suits looked at her and went, you can't say that, that's not polite.
Yeah.
We're facing extinction. Fuck
Yeah.
polite, frankly. You know,
Yeah.
we now got the F word so often.
Yeah. It's coming.
It's not about being polite. We are facing extinction,
Yeah.
actual extinction of the human race. And the fact that our neurophysiology is not really wired to accept that
Yeah.
does not make it less real.
Mm.
And unless we have unless we have motivation, agency, direction, and empowerment, we cannot embrace it.
Mm.
But once we have that sense, so any human power, the work that you and I are both doing is to give people a sense of direction towards a different way of being.
Yeah.
The motivation that getting there is worthwhile, the
Mm.
agency of I can see what's mine to do, and the
Mm.
empowerment of I have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
And we need to bring people together in a critical mass
Yeah.
and get doing that, because otherwise our kids are not going to have a livable planet. And I don't know how many people need to hear that in a way that actually sinks in.
What I love about how you're approaching this, Manda, and I've heard you talk about this in other conversations, is why you're doing it in a fiction book, you know, to make it accessible, to make it like an easy pill to swallow. It's almost like you don't know you're swallowing a pill.
Right.
It's
Yes.
kind of sugar coating.
Yeah, a bit. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Or people think they're getting a nice novel, and they are.
And they're getting a thriller, and
And it
there
is
is a
very
level at which you can
exciting.
just read it as a thriller. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Really? Do you
It's slightly
think?
harder. I don't know, and probably not actually, because it ends on the night after a general election, so it's quite hard. This is why I got the angry email from the lady who said it's too political, and
Yeah.
everything else I've ever written has been political,
Yeah.
but it's been slightly less obvious. The word politics was not necessarily in there when I was trying to let you understand that Joan of Arc was not who you thought she was, or that
Yeah. Yeah.
pre-colonial Britain functioned in a way that you hadn't quite got your head around. So yes.
Yeah. So I love that you're doing it in a way that's accessible, and the question that I'm sitting with is how to scale it up, I suppose,
How do we
because
scale it?
yeah.
And we have to scale the healing, and that means getting
Yes.
people to know that they have to heal and they can heal.
Yes.
Because I think, and this is something Thomas Hubel talks about, I'm going to be talking to Bob Faulkner in a while, who's done a lot of this work with IFS. How do we heal at scale? So if
Yes.
your listeners,
Yeah.
everybody accepting that the healing needs to happen,
Yeah.
looking at our own fears and our own triggers and accepting those are parts that are traumatized.
Yeah.
They are having trauma responses. Healing is possible.
Totally
Healing
possible.
is necessary.
And it doesn't even need to take long, I'm finding. Once you commit to
Once you commit to it, yes.
it can be extraordinarily quick.
And it's an accelerating thing. I think it's harder to heal the early bits, and once your system understands that healing is possible, then the doors open. And know that there is another way of being.
Right.
I think this is really important. If everybody on the planet woke up tomorrow And their ask was clean water, clean air, clean soil, clean, clear connections within all parts of ourselves, between ourselves, each other, ourselves, and the web of life. Predatory capitalism would be over
Yeah.
by tomorrow night. It's
Yeah.
not inevitable. We've been told. There's, I think it was Frederick Johns who said it's easier to imagine the total extinction of life on Earth than it is to imagine an end to capitalism. But that doesn't mean it can't end. The quote from which the book is, that the book title is taken, was Ursula Le Guin saying, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems unassailable, but then so did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings." And very often the focus of that resistance begins in art, often in our art, the art of words. She said that 10 years ago.
Beautiful.
And it's true.
Yeah. Oh.
Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. We just have to stop pretending that the existing system is in any way capable of moving us to where we need to go. And yet we are capable of moving to where we need to go.
Yeah.
Together, all of us.
Yeah. So we need to heal ourselves so that we can appreciate ourselves actually, and the space, the me-shaped space that I take up in the world and what I've got to give to the world, and then to be able to start to visualize, use to tap into our own creativity and our creative well, and that comes from the connection.
Yeah.
And then visualize something new, and everybody has the power to visualize.
Yeah. And talk to the people, or listen to the people who are already doing it. I think there's a lot of the answers are already out there. Joe Brewer's got his whole bioregional thing going. Dark Matter Labs is doing amazing stuff. Opus in Sheffield, even in Bristol, Civic Square. Civic Square in Bristol, doing amazing stuff. There's so much happening already on the ground that never makes it into the public eye because we have a media system designed to perpetuate the old system. So we have to, there's so many layers. We have to heal ourselves, our connections with each other. We have to start talking to each other while we still can.
Yeah.
Because Musk owns Starlink, it is possible that this might, without getting paranoid, they could shut down the internet tomorrow if they chose to.
Yeah.
So while we still can, we need to talk to the people that we care about. We need to build the communities as a place of purpose and of passion that are predicated on a whole different set of values, on agency and sufficiency and empowerment and connection and being the best of ourselves and bringing the best of ourselves to every single moment. And if you connect to the web of life with gratitude and compassion and joyful curiosity, 3 pillars of the heart mind, and send that out, it reverberates and it magnifies, and you become a source and a beacon of that in the world. And the world needs that.
Yeah. Oh, that feels like a beautiful natural culmination. I mean, I've adored talking to you, Manda. It's been so much fun. I'm so grateful for your...
It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so, beautiful. And the red kites
The red
moved
kites
on
still
now. No, they appear from time to time, but I don't usually see them from this room. I normally have to go up there to see them, but they sometimes make a little appearance at the right moment. Exactly.
And listen to the web, because in all of these little things it's talking to us. And what we're finding with the shamanic work is it's coming in closer and more urgently and more keen to engage. All we have to do is open and say yes, and learn how to sift out our own head mind projections from the authentic connection that's coming. That's big work, but it's not impossible.
And so if people have been listening to this and they are loving what you're talking about and they want to know more about how to do that, you are not teaching yourself, but you have somebody teaching.
I teach the more advanced classes. So there's Accidental Gods is a membership, and a lot of the 3 pillars of the heart mind is the latest module in there. There's a lot of stuff you can do on your own. It's designed for everyone to do their own work, connecting to water and air and earth and fire, not in that order, and then setting intent, and then learning to let go into connection, and then the 3 pillars of the heart mind. And you have to be in Accidental Gods if you want to do the Dreamy Awake work at any length, you can come into a first foundation course on Dreaming Awake. So dreamingawake.co.uk is the shamanic work. Accidentalgods.life, accidental gods all one word, .life is the Accidental Gods membership. And they work together. Dreaming Awake's been going since I wrote the Boudica books. Accidental Gods has been going since just before lockdown. So, but they all come from the same source. They're all heading in the same direction. So you can come into Accidental Gods and experience it and see if it's what you would like to do. And then the Dreaming Awake is more small group teaching, either in person or online.
Yeah.
So yeah, that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Manda.
Thank you. It's really been a delight.
Oh, good.
So,
Thank you. And listen to Manda's podcast, of course. The accidental. Did you mention that? You maybe mentioned it, but
Accidental Gods podcast. That would be lovely. After you've listened to this one, you can go listen to that.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Manda.
Super. Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening to my conversation with Manda Scott. I really hope that you found it interesting, and that you'll go and check out her work, all her books and her podcast and her membership. And again, that's mandascott.co.uk. You can find all those, all that information. And if you're a visionary, somebody with a vision for how things could be different, if you're a cycle breaker and a change maker, and you really, you can see a vision for the future and it requires substantial change, and you also know that you're going to need to show up as the very best version of yourself if you're going to bring about that change, then I believe I might be able to help you, because, it's all very easy to get inspired, isn't it? And we come away from motivational talks and things that inspire us, and we feel so excited about bringing about this change. And then, the hard truth of it can hit us, and the imposter syndrome comes in. Who am I to feel like I can make any kind of difference? And it can be hard to even get out of bed in the face of that kind of resistance. Well, this is really my area of expertise, and I would love to have a conversation with you if this is something you're experiencing, like procrastination, an inability to follow through on the tasks that will help you to make the change that you're really capable of, and what to do. It's just you're finding it hard to actually do it. So this is really what my work is. It's about using RTT, rapid transformational therapy, which is a kind of hypnosis. I help people to rewire the unhelpful and, quite frankly, limiting beliefs that we get conditioned to believe. And I help people to believe in the limitless version of themselves. And this is inspired by my own practice in Tibetan Buddhism. But anyway, if you want to find out more about me, please go to truewealthwithbetty.com, and you can download a free workshop there, all about why we need to heal our past to grow our businesses, or, our vision, and actually make that difference in the world that we know that we can make. I'd love to hear from you. So truewealthwithbetty.com if you want to find out about me, mandascott.co.uk if you want to find out about Manda. And I'll catch you next time. Please do share this episode if you found it inspiring with somebody who you think might enjoy it, and do subscribe to the podcast. That really helps me to get the word out there. All right, that's all for today. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening.